Welcome, everyone, to Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch. Before we get going on a very cool episode today, I want you to make sure that you subscribe to this channel. And if you love what I'm doing here and you love what we're giving you, please support us by clicking to help support us. You could donate to this podcast. You could be a sponsor of this podcast, and help us bring you more great information and inspirations and conversations. And don't forget, you can follow me and learn more about me at cucinaaurora.com. We talk about kitchen witchery. We've got all kinds of recipes and food magic. And you can follow me at cucinaaurora.com, and all over Facebook and Instagram at Cucina Aurora. Yes. So today, oh my goodness, on Conversational Witchcraft, I'm really excited. We have Rick Yampert. He's very impressive. Okay. Like his resume is so long. Rick is a longtime journalist who spent 23 years as an entertainment writer for the Daytona Beach News Journal. He presents workshops and lectures on metaphysical topics at a variety of pagan festivals in the Southeast and performs music at pagan and non-pagan events, including Unitarian Universalist churches. Rick has studied Hindu, sacred sound, shamanic drumming, goddess worship, Taoism, and more. His crow art, which we're going to talk about later, has been displayed publicly around Florida as well. Let's all welcome Rick to the show. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me, Dawn. It's any day I get to talk about crows, it's a good day.
I'm so excited. And I said before we hit the record buttons, when I saw the title of your book, I was like, oh, Crows and Ravens. Oh my goodness. I need to talk to this person about this amazing, right? Because we all work with these creatures, kind of even unbeknownstly. They're in our lives all the time. I want to save the majority of that conversation for a little later, and I want to let
Sure,
everyone get to know you a little bit, because
sure.
your story and your journey into witchcraft and paganism, it's a little different than everybody else's. It's you had this life writing for this Daytona Journal, music and entertainment writer. Like, I want to know how you got from there to here.
Well, I can tell I the very, very earliest seed. I was working in at the newspaper in Dothan, Alabama, in the mid to late '80s. I went up to the library and I saw a friend of mine was in the stacks, and I said, "Oh, hey, Julie," and I went and talked with her. And then we talked for 5 or 10 minutes, and she left, went on her way. And I noticed that I was in the world religions metaphysical section here in not so big Dothan, Alabama, which is Bible Belt city,
Yeah.
small city. Anyway, I looked up and there was a book on Celtic Irish mythology, spirituality. And I just was flipping through it and I came across an image of, and I don't know if you can see this, but anyway, the Cernunnos image from the Gundestrup cauldron, which is the antlered god of the ancient Celts.
Right.
And I didn't know it at the time. My heritage is Irish and French. But anyway, this image of this figure sitting in a Buddha like pose with antlers coming from his head.
Yeah.
And I read that, oh, this was an image on a cauldron that was found in a bog in Denmark. But immediately I'm thinking, what's this? Why is this being, this male figure, have antlers coming out of his head? Who
Yeah.
did this? What's going on? Da, da, da. So that was my initial curiosity. And then when I moved to Daytona in 1990, as a journalist, I was also an entertainment and features writer. So I always liked writing and talking and interviewing people, for lack of a better term, the weird shit, the stuff outside of the mainstream. And so
Yes.
I was fortunate my editors uh, would allow me. It's like, oh, there was a UFO group in the area. It's like, oh, I want to talk with them and find out why and they believe in extraterrestrials. For me, that was always the most interesting question of journalism is why.
Mm.
And believe me, the news stories, I started out in hard news, covering city commission meetings, blah, 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 who, what, when, where. But for me, the best question to ask is why? Why does this interest you? Why did you get into crows, Rick? Why, what spurred that? Or why did you become a painter? Da 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 da. So I've always was asking those questions, and ran into started running into the metaphysical shops and just became interested in world religions, different belief systems. So I got to do stories on local witches in the Daytona area. I'd say, oh, um, yeah, back then, Halloween was the news peg. So if Halloween comes up, I know it's a cliche now. I'm a little
I know it
embarrassed still.
is, right? But it's
Yeah.
true.
So it's like, oh, can I interview some local witches since it's Halloween? And they said, oh yeah. So that started taking me into paganism, witches, witchcraft, Wicca, and all the while, Cernunnos was in the back of my mind. So
Really?
that's how it started, and it resonated with me. Just this seeing, finding divinity manifested in nature,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also the aspect that there is Wicca and witchcraft and paganism, um, sees most of us. My spiritual path, I identify as pagan. Most of us sense that there is a divine feminine as well as a divine masculine. To
Yeah.
me, that's just self-evident,
It just
you
makes
know.
sense, right?
Yeah,
It just
yes,
makes sense.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then the I have given talks on paganism to local UU churches. And then there's that whole aspect of magic, which can be amorphous and a hard to define term. But for me, magic is the way I like to talk about it is it's aligning ourselves, connecting to the energies that are out in nature. I mean, we learn in the fifth grade. I sound like I'm preaching now. You can just tell me to
No, you
shut
don't
up.
at all. You don't at all. I'm
Oh,
I'm I'm very interested because there's a long period of time between you're in this, you find this one book and this one image to, okay, now I'm, in Daytona and I'm interviewing witches at Halloween, and then
yeah.
jump to now I'm teaching classes on paganism and I'm writing my own books.
Yeah. Okay.
There's
Well, thank you.
there's connective tissue in there that I find
Exactly.
really, really interesting, right? So like you said one of the things you said was Chronos was always just ever present, right? Throughout
Yeah.
your journey of learning. So for myself, one of the things that drew me into paganism and witchcraft was it was so open and I could have, do, believe, and be whatever I wanted within it, as opposed to the very strict structure in which I grew up in, where you had to fit into this box. You're a girl, you have to do these things, you have to look this way,
Yeah.
you have to believe these things, stand up, sit down, kneel. Like, there's so many rules. And in paganism, there were no rules except, don't fucking hurt anybody. Like
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
it. But you're saying that Chronos was such a present figure for you. Where did you see him? Where did you feel him the most? And was he the guiding light into you exploring more deeply into paganism?
Well, my heritage is French. Yampert is a
Mhm.
French name, and Irish.
Mhm.
And so when Cernunnos, when that image came up, started invading my consciousness, uh, it was a connection to my roots, and I wasn't deeply connected to my
Mm.
Irish roots. And but then the more I started reading, there was a key book. That's another thing about us Wiccans and pagans. There is no central dogmatic
Yes.
one text, and
Yes.
yet, ironically and conversely, uh, uh, Stephen Posch, Posch, he's a uh, pagan or Wiccan up in Minneapolis. I used to read his blog, but he said the monotheistic religions are people of the book. You know, the Christians and Muslims see them as, but he said we pagans and Wiccans. Oh, did you hear the crow? Anyway, I think they're here. Yeah. But we pagans and witches and Wiccans are people of the library. So
Oh, I
books, and
love that so
I do,
much.
yeah, I do too. So there was a book called Earth God Rising by Alan Richardson, which was a key text I came across in the early 90s. And in that book, it's basically Earth God. It's Earth Cernunnos and some of the Egyptian pantheon. But he writes near the end about going to a Rolling Stones concert, and I don't know if it's Mick Jagger on stage or whatever the lining, but he had a vision of Cernunnos at a Rolling Stones concert.
I could
So
see it. I
I
could see
exactly.
it. I could
So
see.
that resonated with me that here's yes, it's mystical and it's ethereal and it's nature, but yet at the same time, uh all these in the early 90s, it seemed like all these coincidences
Mm,
started happening. It's like, oh, why did I find out, how's this? Oh, there's pagan pride days. So
yes.
anyway, so
Yes.
I became it's like, okay, this is a path that makes sense to me
Hmm.
and resonates with me. And
Yeah.
so I was in the proverbial broom closet for a long time. Then I started at the paper wearing, I don't know how much that,
Yeah.
anyway,
I
over
get you.
here's a serpent, the Hindu Om, the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And if my colleagues asked me, what's that about? I would say, well, I'm pagan. Here's my spiritual path. So
Right.
eventually I just came out slowly. And I was still allowed to do stories on alternative spiritual paths.
That's great.
Uh, yeah. And so uh, I tell people in my journalism career when I would speak to colleges or any groups about my profession, that it's a license to pry. I mean, look at you. You're an interviewer, so you have a license to
I
pry.
mean,
So
it's
I can
just,
ask, we can
yeah.
ask people the most, respectfully, of course, but we can ask people all these questions that we would never ask, just somebody on the street, if
Yeah.
it's an interview situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm
And
rambling
I
here.
think that, to your point there, I think that pagans and witches tend to be we tend to live very openly in most cases, especially now. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I used to live a corporate lifestyle. So I was in
Oh,
corporate design for a long time when I grew up and lived in New York. And so I always had to hide my paganness and my witchiness, right?
yeah.
So to your point, I think today we're able to live more openly. Even
Yes.
because so witchy stuff is trendy, whatever, but it gives us a little bit more space. And I think because we live more openly, not necessarily, I don't see it as a license to pry. I think because we live more openly, people tend to feel that openness
Yes.
and talk to us and feel comfortable. And at least for me personally, like I make best friends with everybody I meet. And oftentimes we get into a really deep conversation, like right off the bat. And I'm like, because I'll lean in and I'll be like, what's that about? Like I
Yeah.
automatically know like this is off or that's off. But so I think that that has to do with my humble opinion there is that it has to do with the way we walk through the world as witches. I want to go back to something you said earlier, and you said,
Sure.
that image of Cronos at a Rolling Stones concert. You also mentioned in the bio your bio states how you worked in goddess traditions as well. One of the things that seems to be coming through for everything that you're saying, this image of Cronos, your current work with crows and ravens, the goddess work is this balance. You're talking about, uh, that there's a sacred feminine as well as a sacred masculine. When I think of Cronos, he is the sacred masculine to me, right?
Yes. Yes.
Not that father figure of, Catholicism. He's not Zeus,
Right.
you know what I mean? That old man, you're gonna get in trouble if you don't do it my way. Cronos is a god of passion, sensuality, knowledge, growth, fertility, sacred masculine, right?
Yes.
And then that
Yes.
sacred feminine. Um, what I hear from you is this, that is the balance and the harmony of nature that sort of drew you into
Well, yes.
paganism.
Well, absolutely. And I um, used to have, and it hasn't happened in a while, but the Jehovah's Witnesses would come knock on the door, and, and my late wife Cheryl, I would invite them in but I would have the unspoken. I would sell this to myself. Is like, okay, you're coming to my house. If you're gonna, I welcome the opportunity. This is all internally in my head.
Right.
If we want to talk spirituality and religion and all that, I'm gonna say as much as I listen.
Mm,
And we pagans and Wiccans and witches don't proselytize. But anyway, so I would just say, and I would literally show them a plant, and I would say, I'm pagan. Um, okay, let's talk. And I would show them a plant, and I say, this is my religion. You put a seed in the earth,
mm,
rain, water, greenery, plant, life happens.
right.
So you have earth, you have air, of course, you
Air,
have water,
sun.
and it's a miracle, and that happens every spring. And then the earth goes, in the northern, the wheel of the year, the seasons, the earth, birth, growth, death, rebirth. And
Yes.
so it's very, very, very simple. But that is my religion. And that fuels my definition of magic too. Is
Mm,
that what is magic? As Crowley said, it's the art and science of making change in accordance with will. For me, it's like we learn in the fifth grade that there's everything is in motion, atoms, energy, everything has energy. The table that we're sitting at, it looks solid, but it's electrons, protons, movement, movement, movement.
yes.
So there's all this energy and vibrations. And for the ancients, one of the ancients, some of the ancients, our ancestors figured out if you put a seed in the ground in the heart of winter, what happens? Nothing. It dies. It's
Mhm.
too cold. If you do it in spring, the plants are going to grow. You're going to have new food. So our ancient ancestors learned to attune themselves with the energies of the earth. It's like, oh, if we do these things, we're going to be able to grow food. So planting and gardening and kitchen witchery, which you're into, that's all magic. And so making that leap, there are so many things we don't understand. I mentioned that I did stories on UFO group
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So something's going on. I don't understand it, but there's something going on. And so there's all these energies and motions in the universe. And I think we just don't understand quite all what's going on. And the same with crows and ravens. There is something, they have this high intelligence. For
Mhm.
me, they're evidence that right in the backyard of, of, of Gaia, of this earth magic, because
Yeah.
as I say in the book, they present this opportunity right in our backyard because they're so ubiquitous, especially crows, that if you spend time just even watching or communing, seeking communion with them, you will see it's like, oh, wow, there is all these mysterious abilities and actions and behaviors.
Mhm.
They're ready-made evidence that the earth, the world, is more mysterious and magical and full of this energy than we realize.
Mhm.
And so
Absolutely.
they're an opportunity for anyone to get closer to Gaia, the Earth Goddess. So my gods are
Absolutely.
Cernunnos and Gaia, and I know Gaia kind of has a Greek, origin, but still. So that's how I refer to my god and goddess energy.
I love
Uh,
that so much. I love that so much. And I want to get into deep dives into the new book. I want to get into deep
sure.
dives into Crows and Ravens. So let's take a quick break. Let's hear from our sponsors so that way we don't have to be interrupted when we get into the good stuff about crows and ravens. We will be right back with Rick Yampert. We are back on Conversational Witchcraft with Rick Yampert. Okay, so just before the break, we started talking a little bit about crows and ravens being kind of like the proof that magic exists on our earth, right? I mean, let's just be real about that. So you have this great new book out. It's called Crows and Ravens: Mystery, Myth, and Magic of Sacred Corvids. Can everybody see that? If you're watching,
Yay!
you're watching.
Yay!
I don't have my
Yay!
background blurred, so but I do have the book. It's really cool. It's a really, really cool book.
Thank you.
So talk, you did just mention a little bit about how you feel about crows, but first and foremost, for those who aren't familiar with corvids, can you tell us what are corvids and what's the difference between a crow and a raven? Because people might not know.
Yeah, and exactly. Okay, my four crows are back. You may
Are
hear
they
them.
back there?
Oh, could you hear that?
A little bit, very,
Yeah,
very little.
yeah. Anyway, I'm on my back patio here. Yeah, yeah. You're on the air. Yeah. Okay, there comes Dart. I throw out popcorn every day.
I can
Anyway,
hear them now.
yeah. Oh,
So they know we're
anyway,
talking about them.
yeah. Corvids is the family. You know, if you remember eighth grade or biology, is the family of birds. Crows, ravens, I think jackdaws, even jays are part of the family Corvidae, which is shortened to corvids. Crows and ravens are cousins, but they are very different. There are no ravens in Florida, according to my Audubon guidebook. And
Right.
I think any pagan witch or anybody who follows an earth-based spirituality, I put this in my book. You really should have an Audubon or some kind of field guide to, even if you live in the heart of New York City or an urban area, you're still going to have the wild around you. So anyway, there are no ravens in Florida. The difference, ravens are much larger. Ravens don't really caw, that classic caw, caw. Ravens have more of a sound that's represented as gronk or
Yeah,
clonk.
they're like oh no, like I could do it. Like a oh oh oh.
Very good. Wow. I'm so
I
impressed.
told you I love birds.
I'm so
Literally.
impressed.
I watch all the bird
Uh,
shows. I have binoculars. I have my bird guidebook. I'm a member
ah,
of the Audubon. I'm
oh,
gonna
good for
geek
you.
out about birds with you. I swear. Okay, sorry, I didn't
Good.
mean to
Oh,
interrupt you.
good.
Yeah, they're
Well,
like, oh,
and I put
oh.
yes, and I put this in the book, but the Cornell University has a wonderful ornithology department and website, and they have YouTube videos where they compare the sound of crows and ravens. So ravens are about considerably larger.
Mhm.
I've had friends who've been out west. I grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico, literally 3 miles from where Oppenheimer and the other physicists made the atomic bomb during
Wow.
World War II. So I'm from out west, northern New Mexico. There's ravens out there. I have friends who've been out there and come back and say, Rick, I see what you're saying about ravens. I saw these blackbirds and they were huge.
Yeah.
So if you ever saw them side by side, you would immediately be able to tell. Ravens also have shaggy throat feathers.
Mm-hmm.
So the sounds they make, gronk versus caw, ravens are larger. Uh, their tail feathers are in flight are slightly different. There's illustration in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they're both highly intelligent, which is it there's a biologist, John Marsliff, and he is the crow guy. He's a wildlife biologist. Last I heard, he's at the University of Washington, but he calls them in his books feathered apes because their
Yeah.
intelligence, they're up there with gorillas and
Yep.
chimpanzees and
Yep.
dolphins.
Yep.
But as one of the motifs of my book is, uh, I'm 3 miles from the ocean. Sometimes when I go to the beach, I'll see dolphins out there. Just it's beautiful seeing them
Yeah.
lope through the water or the intercoastal waterway that's near me also. But that's the only contact I have with dolphins. And gorillas, chimpanzees, I only see see them in zoos, and I wish they were running wild. But anyway,
But
but crows,
crows,
they're
they're
everywhere.
everywhere.
Crows are more what I call human gregarious.
How do
Uh,
you mean?
mean they're just more apt to be around people and in urban areas. Now ravens will be too. It's
Yeah,
a matter of degree. And so when I speak, I'm speaking really about crows because I have never seen a live raven.
we have
Uh,
ravens here in New Hampshire.
oh, I'm
We
so
have ravens
jelly.
here in New Hampshire. In fact, so I don't I mean I'm not living in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
45 minutes hour outside of Boston, but the street that I live on, maybe half a mile down the road, is a farm. And it's old farm. They have like one cow and one horse and big empty fields and a barn that's pretty much decrepit. And on the top of that barn, whenever I go for a walk, two, two giant ravens. And they just
Oh,
sit up there. They're watching everything. They want to make sure what's going on. They make that guar noise. And you're walking by and they're making that noise and they're looking at you and you're like, we're cool. We're cool, man. I'm looking up at you. I see you. I respect
I
you. I'm happy to see you. But then the crows come in the backyard, and you'll get 5 or 7 at a time.
yes.
And again, they're going after whatever's in the yard. They're looking for whatever food there is. And then again, like you said, they're so smart. I feel like crows are like, they use people. They're like, I know where your French fries are. Like, I'm coming for your French fries. I,
I
and the Ravens are like, I don't need your French fries, bitch. They're like, I
you're
get my own food. You know what I mean?
that's it. That's a nice summation. That's been my experience again on the Raven side through reading and hearing people's
Yeah.
experiences. But I say in my book and other crow people who have written about crows, it seems to be common that sooner or later somebody will say, and I say it in my book, it seems like crows are watching us humans as much as we watch them.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Here in my backyard, there's squirrels and crows. So when I throw out tortilla chips, saltine crackers, or popcorn, the squirrels, bless their little bastard hearts, they'll just rush in and get it. And so at first look, people might say, "Oh, the squirrels are braver. They just come, rush out, get it, run back to the trees." My home backs up to woods, even though I'm in a subdivision, I'm in a cul-de-sac. And the crows will come, and I've been hanging out with crows for 12 years. And even now, every year though, every spring, new crows arrive.
Oh,
And people,
really?
yeah, for me, and this has been my experience here. And people will say, well, how can you tell the difference? They all look alike. Well, they do kind of all look alike. There's some they'll differ in size, but their behaviors will be different if you watch them. Once, 2 springs ago, the three crows that would come by daily, they would get crackers or tortilla chips and fly over my back patio. I was like, where are they going? Anyway, I finally went out. They would take their food to the top of my house
Mm-hmm.
and eat. Other
Right.
crows would take their stash to certain trees. Uh, they have a large vocabulary.
And they're
Crows,
watching you. They're
ex
going, I know this guy puts out the popcorn at 2:30 every day. So it's 1 o'clock. We got an hour and a half before breakfast is served. Like, they know.
That's exactly it, and I'm convinced. Um, there's science. I guess I should say to your listeners, there's chapters on quote unquote the science of corvids
Yes.
because uh, that's one thing that anyway, myself, I have my my rational pragmatic brain,
Yes.
and over here's my my mystical intuitive brain.
Yes.
So they're always kind of constantly.
Yes.
So but it was just natural for me to put the science in the book because the science reinforces the magical aspects.
Yes.
It's like they're highly intelligent. Crows have this huge vocabularies. We're used to caw, caw, but they make a sound like a cat caterwauling. They make a sound like a dove. They make a clicky, clicky clack sound. And if you watch them long enough, um, and around them, you can start to kind of connect. Okay, I've never heard until I went to the Florida Pagan gathering 3 weeks ago. I had never heard a crow make what I call the kitty cat sound in flight. So it used to be 100% of the time when I heard this, it would be
Mhm.
from a crow perched on a limb. But at the Florida Pagan gathering deep in the woods, a crow flew over and made that sound. I was like, oh, what's going on? So I
Wow.
don't know. I'm kind of ambling here, but anyway, uh, so they're super intelligent. The squirrels will come in and run back, even though I'm feeding the crows every day. I'm so jealous. You'll see on YouTube people say, "Oh, the crows bring me gifts."
I know. How do you get them to bring you freaking gifts?
I've
I give
seen
them stuff all the time.
I've seen, a number of YouTube videos. Uh,
Yes.
Crow fans, Corvid fans will say, "Here's how you do it," and even though every spring it seems two or three or five different crows come and the others leave. I haven't figured out why, but the crows, they recognize me. I'm convinced of that. But when I go out, they'll hop two or three branches up higher
Mm-hmm.
in the tree and
Mm-hmm.
they'll watch. And although there's one this season, this spring, who seems more bold, more bold than the others, and he won't go quite as high as the others. So I'm wondering if this one may be becoming more comfortable with me.
So,
So,
what drew you to crows and ravens in the first
oh,
place?
well, yeah.
How did
This
you make that connection?
I went to Ireland in 95. I've been twice. My first trip was in 95. Silly me, I didn't really consider it a roots, searching for my ancestral roots trip
Really?
until I got back. But anyway, I'm a big fan of Yeats, William Butler Yeats, the Irish poet. Big fan of U2. I love just the country, the beautiful country, the greenery from seeing it. And my heritage is Irish, although I know next to nothing in detail. But I felt this call to go to Ireland. And when I was over there in the General Post Office in Dublin is a statue of Cuchulainn, the mythic Irish warrior. And there's a famous scene in the Irish myths which date back to the uh, orally, I don't know, 800, 900 AD. I'm not sure. They may have been first written down around 1100 Common Era. Anyway, there's a statue of Cuchulainn. He tied himself to a post before his death. He got wounded in battle, even though he was a um, had superhero abilities. He tied himself to a post because he didn't want to die lying down. But in the statue and in the myths, there's a famous scene at his death when a crow or a raven, they're not really sure which, is perched on his shoulder. So when I saw that statue in the Dublin post office, it's like, what's that crow doing on the shoulder of Cuchulainn? And I didn't knew next to nothing about the Cuchulainn
Yeah.
mythology. And it turns out in some of the versions of the tale, that is the Morrigan, the Irish battle goddess who shapeshifts into a crow or raven, and who had this kind of dysfunctional rom-com kind of relationship with Cuchulainn. She would try to kill him, then she would try to seduce him, and or maybe it's the other way. She tried to seduce him. He said,
No,
"No, I've
thank you
got to
very
go
much.
into yeah, I've got battles," and that incensed her, and so she shapeshifted into various creatures to try to kill him. But anyway, that was the start of it. It's like, what's this crow and raven or raven doing on his shoulder? So, and when I got back, I was like, oh, of course this was a roots trip. There's something in me that wants to know
Yeah.
more about my ancestral heritage. And in the book there I focus on three main cultures. Irish culture, because crows and ravens figure prominently,
Yep.
and the Norse with
Absolutely.
Odin. Odin and his two ravens, Hugin and Munin, and then Native Americans, especially the Northwest Pacific Coast tribes, where Raven is a trickster figure. And there's so many Raven tales that are just, and I write about those in the book. And so, but that, yeah, at the post office, that's what really got me started. And then back home, so I started noticing, there's crows in my home in Palm Coast, Florida. Crows would come to the backyard. This was, I guess,
Hmm.
12, 15 years ago. And I just started throwing them crackers, and more of them would come. And so I was just a crow watcher. And then I started taking photos,
Yeah.
and then I started shape shifting the photos. It's like, these, I'm on my pagan path. Even, but from the beginning, it's like, this is evidence of Gaia, right here in my backyard, the Earth Goddess.
Hmm.
This is, in her whimsy and wonder, she has placed these creatures right in our midst, and so it's a direct, soulful, spiritual connection to see these highly intelligent creatures, which you don't even have to understand, but okay, what are they doing? What's going on? But it's evident that there's more than just, you know,
Backyard
and
birds.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Can
And
you can you explain what you mean by it's evident that they're more than backyard birds and that this is, Gaia in her whimsy giving us, like, what do you see? What is the connective tissue that basically proves that these creatures are otherworldly?
well, I moved 4 years ago, literally 3 miles down the road here in Palm Coast. But at my other place, which also back to woods, and there was a canal
Mm.
behind, a man-made canal, but it looked like a creek. So sometimes alligators would be in the canal. Sometimes they'd come into my backyard, and black racer snakes are everywhere. But whenever I would, and of course, I don't go near gators. But whenever I would encounter a gator in the canal, uh, I would just throw a stick near it. Wasn't trying to hit it to scare it away. But then, I learned a gator would hear something and it's a predator. So it would go to
Yes.
the noise, not away. It's like,
Yeah.
duh, okay, Ranger Rick, you got to get smart about nature. And the same with the black racer snakes that would come on my back patio. They would hear a noise. Now, once they saw me, then they would slither away, but their first instinct. So all that is to say, those creatures are working, you can tell they're working on instinct. And the same with the
Mm.
cardinals that come to my backyard here, the Carolina wrens. I saw a bobcat in my yard, I guess back 2 years ago. It sat and just watched my backyard for like 15 minutes. Deer have come to the yard. All those creatures, you can tell they're operating on instinct, but yet
Right.
crows, they come into our sphere of us humans, and they act with deliberation. They
Mm.
act, and again, it's not. Uh, you don't have to be a pagan. You don't have to be a credentialed wildlife biologist to see that they behave differently than most creatures. I mean, even dogs. Dogs, I love dogs. I love cats. They're intelligent. Don't get me wrong, dog lovers. Don't write it. If you're going to write into Dawn and say, "Oh, I'm a
Yes.
dog person, not a
Yes.
crow."
Yes. We
Sorry.
we love
I,
animals. We love animals. We love animals. But I understand what you're saying about, and it's funny, as you're speaking, there's a cardinal right outside my window behind me, and I can hear him going peep, 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 peep. And so
yeah,
I know it's him. We have a mated couple of cardinals, but I see what you're saying about, if you are keen to observe the behaviors and tune in to the energy of what's happening in nature around you, you'll notice that crows and ravens are not acting on instinct to just survive. They're
right.
observing, they're
Yes,
being patient, They're making choices. They are contemplative, in my experience, in a
Yes,
way
yes,
that other animals are not. They don't react, they're not very reactionary all the time, where again, like if I open my door and there's birds outside, they're gonna fly, right?
yeah,
If just literally 2 days ago, I came outside and there was like roadkill in my street, and there was a crow enjoying his breakfast, eating that roadkill, which we also appreciate, right? Because
yes.
they're helping the ecosystem, but also there is that the link to the other side through crows and ravens. This crow kind of like looked at me and was like, "Hey, what's up?" Okay,
Yeah,
like he assessed me, and he
yes,
was like,
yes,
"Okay, this human's not a threat. I'm going to go back to my breakfast." Right?
exactly.
Non-reactionary. There's an understanding, I think, that kind of proves your point, I think,
Yeah.
is what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah, and I knew just superficially about the Norse mythology and traditions. And so when I was writing my book, I did a deep dive into Norse mythology. So Odin, the chief god of the ancient Norse, the Scandinavians, the Vikings, he's got like 150 different epithet type names, and
Yeah.
several. He's considered the raven god among
Yep.
many other names, but he has those two ravens. I'm going to just this is in the book, but just a short primer. They sit on each shoulder, Hugin and Moon, and each day they fly around the world and report back to Odin what they've seen. And so the ancient Vikings, the ancient Scandinavians, named these birds Hugin and Moonin, which are traditionally translated as thought and memory. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
shortly after reading, about Scandinavian culture, Viking culture, the mythology, it's like the ancients, the ancient humans who encountered these ravens in their midst, they weren't stupid. They's like, wow, these birds have thought.
Mm.
These birds have memory, and that John Marsliff, the biologist I cited earlier, in the science part of my book, um, he famously, and so many people know about this. When I bring it up, they say, "Oh yeah, we know that crows and ravens recognize and remember human faces." And the reason we
Mm-hmm.
know that definitively is that John Marsliff conducted experiments at the University of Washington, and I relate this in the book. Uh, he did. I'll try and give the short version, but he was wondering why, when he would walk across campus and one or two or three of his colleagues who were studying crows and ravens, he's like, why are all these crows dive bombing me? Scolding is what it's called. He said, and they're not bothering anybody else who's walking across the quad. What's up? So anyway, he devised an experiment where he got a taxidermied crow, and believe me, he would not have killed a crow for just the
Right.
experiment.
Right.
He's the crow guy. Uh, but he would have a student walk across campus in a mask, a caveman mask, carrying this taxidermy crow, and the crows would go apeshit because it's like, oh, this human has killed one of us.
Oh
So
my God.
the crows would go apeshit, and then when a different, he said, well, maybe they're alerting on something else. Anyway, but then he would have students walk across campus with the caveman mask, but no crow taxidermy, and the crows would go
They
just,
recognized him.
yeah, and just scolding,
That's
dive. It's
amazing.
like this face is a threat to us, and it gets even more creepy because they realize that it wasn't just the crows that witnessed the taxidermied crow. It was like, okay, so maybe three or five crows witnessed that, but it was the whole crow community.
Yeah, they told their friends. They
Exactly.
told their friends. I just, not to defer too far,
No,
but
no, go ahead,
a
please.
couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago, I was watching something. Oh God, I'm pulling it out of the back of my memory now. A study showing that crows mourn. They
Yes.
mourn the death of their friends. So
Well,
they found, some scientists found, maybe it's the scientist you're even talking about, I don't know, but they found, a crow had died and the rest of the murder, right? It's a murder, not a
yeah.
flock. The rest of the murder came and like sat with the dead body and laid things down next to it. Like they all took a minute before flying on. They were mourning I mean, not to add, what's the word I'm looking for? Not to
Anthrop, anthrop,
anthropomorphize, and put my feelings on them, but this was what else could they possibly be doing? They
well,
weren't
there is some research, and I talk about that in the book. The term is crow funerals, and
amazing.
yeah, and different sources I've read, they think that most of the biologists think there is a practical matter in that the crows are trying to determine why one of their kind was killed. Is there a predator nearby? Is there some condition that we need to be aware of?
Mhm,
So there is that practical aspect of it. And from what I've read, there are other animals who recognize they're dead beyond just the instinct. I think elephants are one.
elephants, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some others. So they're not quite sure how much of that actual lament aspect of oh, one of our kind died. But they're not entirely sure, but the best science hypothesis is it's going to help the Crow tribe if they figure out what caused this death. And I have different friends. In fact, my editor, Heather Green, who lives in Atlanta, she emailed me and she said, Rick, I hear crows.
Yeah.
Uh, can you hear? Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, I hear crows around my home.
Yeah.
She said, I'll put out some, food. And she said, but they won't come into my backyard. And this is just a theory, but I told her it's very possible that something happened to a crow in her backyard, unknown to her, or maybe even before she lived there.
Wow.
So they may have marked this place as this is not friendly to crows. Avoid
Wow.
this.
Wow.
So that could be. So I'm very a friend of mine, my best friend since high school, sent me these wonderful pro cutouts. They're two-dimensional, like they're life size, and they're made out of felt, cloth, cardboard, and just crows in different poses. And my girlfriend Michelle says we should put those out there on the backyard on the ground and see how they react. And I said I thought about that, but if they think that it's some kind of human voodoo happening against them, I don't want to scare them away permanently because
Right.
I'm quite
Right.
certain that they would note this. So I haven't. I would love to experiment with that, but I don't want to freak out the crows, and I don't
Right.
want to mess
Right.
up my good thing. I mean, I feel so blessed. There's Dart. I'm indicating, looking out my back window. The crow I named Dart is out there now getting popcorn. But I don't want to mess up my relationship with.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about the science and the intelligence of crows. We've talked a little bit about the lore and the different, places in the world where crow mythology really is at the forefront, right? Since we're getting a little short on time, can you give us a little bit of either understanding or tips in terms of magical workings with the energies of corvid birds?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It sounds very very basic. One bridges the practical and the magical, and in my book, the ancient Tibetans, like from the ninth century Common Era, and the Irish around the 1600s, each of them, there were writers back then who came up with these divination texts based
Mm,
on the sounds of crows.
Wow.
Yeah. So and these are actually available online through archive.org. You can read some of the text or
Wow.
translations of the text. So and there's all these, if a crow says ga ga gi, that means a king is coming. If the crow says hoo coo qua at at after midnight, it means your horse is going to be stolen. It's that kind of
Right.
specific.
Right.
And the Irish one is kind of not quite as detailed, but my takeaway from that is it shows how much the ancients were in connection, in communion with crows. And it's also like every day there's a rooster that lives across the field, over like 2 miles from my backyard.
Yeah.
But I'm woken most mornings by the crows. They're here, and every morning it's caw, caw. It's three caws, and I'm convinced that they're saying, well, I don't know if they know me as Rick, but they're saying, "Human, we're here.
Where's our
We
popcorn?
Where's our popcorn?" Exactly. So that's one way. If you're blessed to listen to them, and you can start to, and I advise keeping a journal. You don't have to write 1,000 pages,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
just write just notes. So I heard the kitty cats sound,
Right.
uh and um one time they make a dove like sound. So if you can start to see the conditions in which they are articulating
Hmm.
this, you may get some insight into, okay, what are they thinking? What are they doing? On another side, which I do, uh, um, for the book, just kind of as a lark. I thought this is kind of cheesy, but anyway, I devised a tarot spread in the shape
Yes.
of an ascending crow, a flying crow. And
Yes.
I thought, what is that? Anyway, so I started working with it, and it really worked. I almost kind of short circuited the idea. It's like, oh, that's kind of cheesy. Oh, the cards are spread and it looks like the wings, but and I just intuitively came up with
Yeah.
a different meaning, and I tried it, and it worked really well.
Yeah.
So there's that. But on the other side, if I'm going to do a tarot reading, not all the time, but sometimes, I will just tell myself, um, however many crows I see the first time, or sometimes, yeah, they're here.
I hear them. I totally
Yeah,
hear them.
yeah,
They want to have a conversation.
yeah. Or sometimes I'll do it if they're sounds like if the next crow I hear caws three times, then I will shuffle the tarot deck. I will go three cards down, then lay that third card into the layout. I'll go three more, lay it into the next card on the layout, and whether it's the Celtic cross
Yeah.
or some other spread. So in a way, I'm letting the crows
Right.
shuffle the deck. And what's the magical basis behind that? People would say, which is certainly a legitimate question. Well, in the book, I talk about how the Norse created raven banners, the ancient Vikings, where they would paint a raven or paint or somehow inscribe or sew. It was the women who did it. And when the Vikings would go on a raids, if the banner was flapping in the wind, that portended success. If the raven flag just drooped, then that portended tough times ahead. And I
Hmm.
never could find out if the flag is drooping, why didn't they just turn around and go home? I'm not sure. I think it's because their life depended on finding resources, even if
Yeah.
it meant stealing. So anyway, long story short of that is the ancients felt this communion with these birds.
Hmm.
So when I say, oh, allow the number of crow caws or the number of crows to shuffle your deck, it's a way, and the lore is filled with divinatory
Right.
aspects of
Right.
visions of ravens and crows.
Hmm.
There's an ancient Roman battle where there's that part of this is in the book. The ancient Romans were battling an army from Gaul,
Yeah.
and a crow appeared and helped the main Roman soldier, distracted the Gaul warrior, that for somehow it became a one-on-one combat. Anyway, the crow arrived. The crow distracted the Gaulish warrior, and the Roman won. And after that, this is historically documented that all the remainder, everybody in the Roman army took that as a sign
Oh,
the
wow.
gods have favored us, and that Roman warrior adopted Corvidus. It's in my book. That became part of his name. So all this is to say the ancients felt connected to these creatures
Hmm. Hmm.
because they didn't have cars or donut
Right.
shops. They
Right.
were living closer to nature.
Right. So it
And
sounds, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, no, I was just going to say,
It's
yeah,
sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. You no, give
Well, I was just going to say, so for me, creating these kind of connections of using crow behaviors or their vocalizations,
Yeah.
bringing them into my magical practice is just, if nothing else, it makes me think of,
Mm.
okay, I'm connecting with these birds in any way that I can. So, but then
Yeah.
any of us who practice magic, we're constantly astounded uh, by, these synchronicities that happen. And it's like,
Yes.
oh crap, how did that happen? It's like, oh,
Oh,
okay,
we are the witches. That's why it
yeah,
happened. Why are we
yeah,
surprised?
exactly. And I'm
Right.
still one who's
Right.
surprised.
Me too. It sounds like what you're saying is the root of beginning this work with crows and ravens and other corvids, because there are different corvids in different parts of the world, so I would assume that
Right.
all of the principles in this book can be used with other corvids. So like you said before, if a blue jay happens to be in the corvid family and that's the creature that calls to you, although not necessarily, right? Because but
Yeah.
like I'm thinking magpies. I don't know why magpies coming to my brain, but
No,
magpies are
yeah,
corvids,
definitely
right?
magpies. Yes.
So it sounds like the root of working with these creatures, based on the lore, based on the history, based on the science, is tuning in, paying attention, realizing they're there all the time, and taking a moment, having awareness of their presence, respect for their presence, and finding connection within. Because you can, saying, hey, let's let the crow's calls shuffle my deck for me, is only going to work if you're paying attention to when the birds are out, what,
Exactly.
are they coming to you? Are you taking your deck to a place where those birds are? If you work in a place where there's tons of birds in the parking lot at lunchtime because they're scavenging on fast food leftovers, sit in that parking lot at lunchtime. You don't have to be in the middle of the woods if you want to commune with these birds. They are everywhere.
Exactly.
They are present, and it's up to us as the pagans and witches to tune into them.
Exactly. And I use the term communion a lot
Yeah.
in my book. Uh, there's uh, there's some spell work in there, but I'm more into communion. I think when pagans or non-pagans, when we somehow create or synchronistically come across, encounter communion with quote unquote nature, uh, things happen,
Absolutely.
because we moderns, and especially in Western civilization, uh, not including the indigenous peoples around the world still seem closely connected
Yeah,
to the land.
for sure.
And so communion is big for me in my pagan path. If that communion happens, then the veil is parted, and we are going to be able to go deeper into the mysteries of Gaia, God, Goddess, the other, whatever names we want to put on it.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure in New Hampshire, down here, the Northern Lights, did you get to see the Northern Lights during the,
Would you believe I was asleep?
oh,
I
goodness.
didn't
Yeah.
even know it was happening. I had had a really busy day. I hadn't turned on the news or anything. And then I woke up in the morning at like 7 a.m. and my phone was blowing up with all my friends sending me pictures of it. I was like, Son of a you gotta be kidding me. Because they
Well,
would have been perfect. I would have been able to see everything perfectly from my backyard. But I see
they
what you're saying.
they were visible here in Palm Coast, but
Wow.
I didn't see them. I'm kind of like you. I kind of missed the main wave. Anyway, but that leads me to think, people everywhere around North America, even in, I guess, around the world, uh, were able to see the Northern Lights, and non-pagans, we're able to see the Northern Lights further south than is normal.
Yeah.
And so people were like, rightfully, oh, wow. It was a
Right.
wow moment. It was nature. It was science telling us how it happened. But everybody that was able to engage them was like, whoa,
Right.
this is magical.
Yes.
And to make,
Regardless of spirituality, regardless of
right,
sexuality, regardless of color, regardless of religion, regardless of whatever,
yeah,
people stopped. They took a moment and they were in awe. They put their damn phones down.
yeah.
They were in awe and communion with nature, even just for a few minutes.
And that's why for me, I believe uh, that crows and ravens offer that same kind of dynamic. They're in the backyard. I see more crows when I go to the Target shopping center than when
Right.
I go into the deep woods. In
Right.
fact, I told my girlfriend Michelle at the Florida Pagan gathering before we left, it was in the deep woods about 30 or 40 miles from my home. And she said, I said, I've never seen crows in the deep woods. And that's kind of, anyway, she said, and Michelle's a psychic intuitive witch. And she said, I think you're going to see crows. Anyway, where we camped in the deep woods, crows everywhere. And
Wow.
but this opportunity to see Gaia, to see earth energies, to see nature, to see evidence that there is something to these earth energies, this earth magic that, and once you realize that with crows and ravens, you'll never look at them the same again, even if you're
Yeah.
not pagan or
Yeah.
or witch. I've had a number of friends who have bought the book, which I'm very grateful and filled with gratitude. Uh, I don't know how they'll approach some of the more deep magical parts of it, but I think they'll connect with it because it will remind them that, oh, okay, I've been seeing these crows for years
Right.
and I never knew that da 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 da.
Right.
So
It's the connection to the mystic. It's the
yeah,
connection. It just like you said, the Northern Lights. It's that thing that makes you go, oh, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe there is something unseen at work here. Maybe if I can just take a moment and connect with the mystical, connect with the divine, I can
yes,
do that in a simple way through spending time paying attention and turning my awareness on when it comes to being around these creatures that we share our world with. Right.
exactly. Yeah,
Rick,
share.
it's been amazing to talk with you. I am so sorry because I could talk to you for hours.
No, no
Uh,
apology,
tell
please.
everyone where they can find your book, Crows and Ravens, Mystery, Myth, and Magic of Sacred Corvids. Where can we buy the book? Where can we follow you online? Tell us, tell
It
us, tell us.
it's available on Amazon. Of course, I guess I should say, but Amazon. It's available on the Llewellyn website.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it is carried by the big box chains,
Mm-hmm.
Barnes and Noble and Books A Million, but I haven't
S-
seen it on the shelves around.
support your local stores, local, local,
Well,
local.
bingo, and that's what I was getting to.
Yes.
Here in the Palm Coast, Daytona Beach area, we're blessed with a number of wonderful independent bookstores and metaphysical shops,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, that's where I've held book
Yes.
signings. So if you have a metaphysical shop or what I endearingly call a witchy poo shop, um, in your area, please, I would hope that uh, all of our tribe supports those people who are uh, doing that. Because what a
Yes.
resource and a blessing
Yes, for
to
sure.
to to have that. So
And where
and
can
if
we
not,
find you
they
online?
Well, rickdyampert.com. It's all one word. I'm in the midst of adding to my website, and
Sure.
I'm on Facebook. I tend to do, and Instagram.
Excellent.
Uh, yeah, look me up. And if you can't find my book, get in touch with me. I'll make sure
Yeah.
I'll drive up
Yeah.
to New Hampshire or Maine
I
or
have two copies. I have two.
two,
I have two. Yes.
one
I
for
have
each
two. Well,
frame.
yes, one for
Yeah.
me and one for my husband. We'll put all of your show notes and we'll put all of your information, all of your links in the show notes. So if anybody is looking to follow Rick, you can just click the links. You can click to buy his book.
Cool.
You can find him. And if you have any questions, you can't find him, you can contact me and I will point you in the right direction. Rick, last question. And I ask this to everyone who comes on the show.
Okay.
So it has nothing to do with crows or ravens. I am a kitchen witch. If you could have me make you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
Oh, well, I'm vegetarian. I'm fine eating cheese, and I finally figured out after a year. I've been vegetarian since 1992, uh, and it's like, why am I okay eating cheese and products with milk, but not anything else? It's like, oh, I don't want to eat flesh. I'm not on a
Mm,
crusade, but I just finally figured out it's like I avoid eating animal flesh. That's why I'm okay eating cheese or
sure.
cookies made with milk. So, what I would like for you to make me is a vegetarian uh, stew. Stew. I'll say stew, or
Ooh.
vegetarian chili. I have a really
Oh,
good recipe for vegetarian chili, and I used to when I first started making it, I would follow all the it's two cups of red beans and did a certain amount, and then it took me like 10 years. Like, wait a minute, I don't have to be so precise. It was my girlfriend Michelle, because she's an excellent kitchen witch. She goes in there and she just like, oh, okay, yeah, this, that, and that. So you make it can be chili or stew.
I
Really, the
make
only
a mean vegetarian chili with black beans and sweet potatoes and wild rice and red pepper. It's delicious.
sweet potato. Oh, see, okay,
Yes.
all right. So
That's what I would make for you.
you're in New Hampshire, so that's probably about. And my stepdaughter went to Emerson College in Boston, so I have driven from there. So I think you're like a 20-hour ride
Just
away.
20-hour drive, no problem.
Okay,
It'll be
so it's
worth it. If you
yeah, so
leave
it's
now,
I'll be up there, and then you'll have time. You'll have the 20 hours to get it together.
I would
So
put it all in the crock pot and I would let it cook for 20 hours. That's what I
oh,
would do.
all those herbs and spices
Yes.
and the flavors are gonna just
Yes.
doing their
And we could
cosmic.
eat it outside on the deck and maybe the ravens will come. That would
That's
be that would
oh,
be excellent.
yeah.
Rick, it
I'm
was so delightful to talk with you. It was so great to learn all about your journey and the amazing crows and ravens. And seriously, guys, if you're at all interested in working with crows and ravens, you've got to read this book. There's really nothing like this book out there. There's a lot of stuff of mythology, there's a lot of stuff about lore, but there's really not a lot of stuff about the practical and then also the meeting with the scientific. So check out Rick. Check out this book, Crows and Ravens, Mystery, Myth, and Magic of Sacred Corvids. Rick Yampert, thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you, John.
It has been
Blessings to you.
blessings to you too. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude.